Lume plotters.
Yes.
Hello.
Hello. Knock, knock. Who's there? Lume plotters.
Lume plotters are there. Hello.
Yes. Anyway,
Yeah.
by the way, a friend of mine, I got a phone call yesterday from a friend of mine named George.
I
and he
can't
said,
believe you
"Are
have
you
friends, and
going
I
to
can't
buy a
believe they
Doug?"
call you. Right?
What?
I can't believe you have friends, and I can't believe they call you.
I know, right? And he said, "Are you buying a Doug?" And I said, "Well, no, I'm not going to buy a Doug because I would spend my money if I had £1,000, dollars, euros, I would spend it on something else." And because apparently you have convinced him to buy a Doug.
The Doug is good.
And I said, "No, I don't think I would put my money there." And he was saying, "Then what else would you buy?" And I said, "Honestly, for 4,000 dirhams, I would probably buy a Nomos secondhand. If I wanted to do this German thing, you can get a Club Campus for around 4K. You could get a number of Hamiltons for around around that price. So, for instance, your Murph was retail price right around there.
Yeah.
You could get
True.
2 Hamilton khaki field mechanicals for that price. So there's quite a bit of option under 4K.
For sure, if you're going pre-owned, sure. There's
No, they're
options.
brand new. The Hamilton's brand new.
Brand new?
Because I just looked it up today, 2K for the Hamilton field mechanical and
right.
37 something for the Murph retail.
That's amazing, actually. Yeah.
So $1,000. So I can buy 2 mechanical khaki fields. So if we want to argue made in Germany, it's Swiss made, right? So
yeah. So, but I mean, look,
with
this is the good thing
movement,
about the
you have
Dougie. You get the Swiss made movement, and it's hand decorated to a certain extent.
Yes.
In
Glashütte. But then if we want to do Glashütte, you get why not use Nomos for the same price?
Sure.
Then
I mean, this depends on
Glashütte.
just of what you like. But I think what the Doug is very classic design. It's with the modern twist on it. I just like it. I think it's that's why I saw it. I mean, of course, there's a bit of patriotism in it that I thought, new German brand, so I have to support it. But I really liked the look. So that was not an impulse buy per se. It was something where I thought, I think I should just experience this watch. So I really need to have it. So, yeah.
So I do agree the finishing is going to be highly better than a Hamilton, for instance. But the Nomos has the in-house movement.
Yeah, that's true.
Which is
very nice. It's a really
nice, exactly.
made in Glashütte. Nomos is so good at doing really nearly everything. Not so sure if they make their own hairsprings. I think yes, right? It's just
I don't know.
They make a lot of stuff. Every single screw, everything they do in-house. It's actually insane. I saw a video once with their factory tour in Glashütte, and it's crazy of how highly integrated they are.
Yeah, I'm very surprised that they can be, because I mean, a Club Campus is what, 6.5K or something like this. It's under 8 for sure. So
it's amazing of how they do this for the price. Yeah, crazy.
Yeah, I don't know how, but anyway, nonetheless, are you wearing your Doug?
No, actually, because I have a sick dog who had a bit of an amputation, so I am carrying around everybody and making sure that everybody goes from potty to food to drinks and all of this stuff. So I'm wearing the rugged Thorn titanium watch. The I don't even know what it's called, Thorn TH00 or something, TH01. The IWC Porsche design homage.
Homage,
the 2K
that we talked about last couple
Navy
times ago.
Of Germany, the Kampfschwimmer.
Yeah. So once again, I had to take off my Pelagos. Because I was wearing the Pelagos again.
Good.
But I said for the podcast, I should put something else on. So I'm wearing my Speedmaster on the Black NATO. And I'm still wearing the Pelagos. I still think it is... I've been really thinking about if it's better than a Submariner. That's where I'm at. Because obviously I had the Submariner. I sold the Submariner. I didn't like a lot of things about the Submariner. And I do believe empirically Tudor makes a better dive watch than Rolex does.
Maybe. I mean,
I think
if it comes to diving, I would actually say the Rolex Submariner is not really a diver's watch anymore.
Exactly.
Because it can't
This is exactly
get the
the
proof,
issue.
The the DIN, the ISO norm for it can't, the date version at least can't.
The date
pass
version can't, but the non-date can. But here's the other issue is it's too bling blingy with that ceramic bezel it's just not cool. Like, I'm sorry, but ceramic bezels are dressy. They are not tools. You can, and Tudor proves that you can make a ceramic bezel that is not shiny, right? You can make a matte ceramic bezel, but Rolex makes it glossy on purpose. They make the dial glossy on purpose to attract attention. And this is attention I don't want. So hence, it's not an attention a diver would want either, right? You're not diving and then saying, oh, well, what great reflections on my watch, right? A tool watch by default should be not reflective. So if you watched the Watches of Espionage, you went into this, right?
Yeah.
All of the Omega issue watches, like these military issued watches, they have foregone the ceramic bezel for aluminum simply because they don't want reflections. So yeah, I think Tudor is the better dive watch. That's my
I must say, I mean, looking at the Pelagos line, they are actually really, really amazing. I love them. I mean, after I tried the Ultra, I think like, wow, after selling my Pelagos.
But I think the Ultra is more your speed. It's bigger.
It's a tiny bit bigger.
It's literally 1,000-meter water resistance.
Yes.
Tiffany blue Pelagos logo. It's cool.
Yeah, it's cool.
I like it a lot.
The problem is I'm still, I think the prices are just, what is this? What is this? What is this in
23K, I think.
23K. No, that's a lot.
That's a bit much. But if you look at the Submariner, which is 40.
Yeah.
If you look at the Sea Dweller, because it's more apt to be compared to a Sea Dweller, that's what, 50K almost now? So
yeah, but then if you look, for example, at the U50 or so from Sin, right? And
yes,
you think,
with a million bajillion meters water resistance.
That's 500, I think, the U50.
No. The one with the
oil filled
oil.
Yeah, that's 5,000 meters or something. I don't know.
Exactly,
but that's a quartz movement, right? So
exactly, but the price is Well, okay. Then if we want to do that number, nothing beats a Doxa.
True.
The Doxa the Doxa 300T has 1,200 meters of water resistance. And it's thin and it has a helium escape valve. So it just shows you that it doesn't make sense why these watches are so thick.
It's the movement, right? I mean, we all know the Kinesi movements are fat bastards. So they're
not
actually,
anymore because in the Black Bay 54, they proved that they can get it narrow.
Yes,
and that Black Bay 54
but it was a new movement
thin.
in it, right? So they actually had to create a new movement that is a bit flatter.
Yes, but the Pelagos 39 is also what 11 point something millimeters thick. It's less than 12, which is less than the Submariner.
Yeah, but I'm still surprised that Zinn can put a 500 meter water resistant watch in a 10 millimeter case.
Yeah,
right, and you think because it's an ETA 2892 base, right? Because that is a very slim movement, and it's old, and it's proven, and it's robust, and it's whatever. And then there's the new versions of it that came out with what is it now? Mido uses in their new stuff, and that's 72 hours of power reserve, but with a reduced beat rate.
So by the way, I don't know. I wanted to do an episode on this. By the way,
is so small.
Submariner alternatives.
Yeah, there's so many.
We'll do this. We'll do this not today because today we have a different topic we want to talk about. But in the future, we will make an episode. I think we should make a series of episodes. The best Submariner alternatives, the best Daytona alternatives, or Speedmaster alternatives, the best this, that, whatever, right?
Okay.
So that way we can have quick reference guides to if you want a Submariner, but you don't want a Submariner.
Yeah, it's a deal. We will do that.
And then by the way, somebody came up to me and asked me about my Pelagos the other day, and the person didn't know who I was in the sense of how big of a nerd I am, and he goes, "Wow, that's a very nice watch. Is it a Tissot?" And I said, "No, it's a Tudor," and he goes, "Hey, it looks a lot like a Rolex," and I was like, "Well, do you have half an hour for me to tell you a story?" I'm like, it actually is.
Back in 1929, when
exactly,
Hans
I was like,
Wilsdorf.
oh God, this guy's gonna kill me. And so I gave him the abridged version. I said, well, technically, I said, Tudor is owned by Rolex, and he said, wow, so like it's got the same movement. I'm like, no, not quite. So I was trying to tell him, like, it's kind of like the testing ground for Rolex, where they would throw a bunch of stuff into it, see if it worked, like the titanium, the movement, the 70-hour power reserve. And then if it works, then they put it into the Rolex, right? So I was trying to explain this to him. I think it went above his head. I don't think this guy was really a watch person, but nonetheless, we talk about once in a blue moon, somebody asks you about your watch, and then they immediately regret asking about your watch because you have told them way too much information. So.
No, what did I do? Yeah, it's like, tell me about your last vacation. And you go, no, I don't, no, don't show me 500 pictures of a cathedral.
Exactly.
No.
So, and his wife was like pulling him, like, let's go, stop talking to this guy.
Yeah.
Yes, so that's
like, no. But wait, I need to tell you one more thing.
This is exactly what
we
happened.
are just, now, you better not, it's like a balloon, right? You pop it, it will deflate completely.
He shouldn't have asked me about my watch. He should not have asked. I'm like, I just got it a couple weeks ago. I got it from a friend. It was a really good deal. Blah, blah, blah. You just didn't go off forever. Now, all right, let's get on to what we're talking about today. So,
the internet has been
buzzing. Yes. So I saw a video yesterday about this was not watch related. This was bag related, handbag related, but it was a guy, and he did a little video about, and by the way, of course, yesterday we are listening to this a little bit after this, but yesterday was the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix, which is what's the exact name of it? The Made in Italy, Emilia Romagna Grand Prix. Del blah blah blah.
I don't know. I mean, Imola is a city in Emilia Romagna, and this is a region in Italy. Yes. And why it's called that, I have no idea.
No, the Made in Italy is a brand.
Okay, Made in Italy.
The Made in Italy is a brand. And this brand, if you go to madeiniitaly.it, they will tell you all about it. Essentially, they're trying to get more products that are made in Italy so that they can stamp this branding onto it. It's obviously a government kind of promotion to get more made in Italy products. Hence, Barilla's being the new pasta sponsor for Formula One and all the Barilla adverts and things like this. Now,
I mean,
they're really
you know,
pushing Italian production.
Pasta is very famous with all of Formula One drivers. As you can see, they're eating pasta all the time.
Yes, of course. Naturally. Not at all. But so this Made in Italy thing, you look up the regulations for what is considered to be a Made in Italy product. What can you put on it? According to Made in Italy, the ultimate deciding factor is the final, they called it the final,
assembly?
What was the word?
Manufacturing?
No. It was the final significant change has to be done in Italy. So, for instance, the guy was saying, according to these rules, I could have a handbag made entirely in China. Then I send it over to Italy. I sew a zipper onto the top. And now I can say it's made in Italy because that would be considered a substantive change to the bag.
Okay.
And therefore it's made in Italy. And you tag it as made in Italy. So this has sparked a lot of controversy because now a lot of people, my wife came up to me and asked me, is this true? There's a lot of these Chinese, there's a lot of influencers that are claiming they're getting bags, Louis Vuitton, Hermes, Chanel bags out of factories in China in this same procedure. So they are being made in China and then they're shipped off and then claim that they're made somewhere else. And these factories are selling, we have the saying in Hungary that it fell off the back of the truck.
Yeah.
So, or it went out the back door. So essentially somebody in these factories are selling black market, or gray market, these bags, claiming them to be original, claiming them to be from the original factory, but sometimes without the original branding. Sometimes, in certain circumstances, with minor alterations, but they're claiming that it was made in the same factory that made the original. So this is, of course, a lot of people are believing this to be happening. And the question is, how legitimate is it? And the same thing is going with watches as well. Lots of things are being manufactured outside of Switzerland.
It's now every TikToker and YouTuber around the world is now seems to be jumping on this, doing zero research and saying all this shit is made in China, and every luxury brand is ripping you off.
Yes.
And so, a short version, no, they don't. I mean, do they rip you off? Is the production value of something
100%.
and the sales price sometimes astronomically distant? Yes, it is. But are we happily paying for this? Yes. Do you get from these guys who are advertising this on YouTube the original? No, you don't. Because like Hermes, Chanel, these guys guarantee no manufacturing in China. They guarantee everything is made in their own manufacturers, and they list them even with locations and who does what, their own tanneries and all of the things, and with MS and whatever you have, where they produce which parts. And they are family owned, Chanel and MS. They do not think in short term, oh, let's produce cheap. I can't talk for the big conglomerates like LVMH and maybe some other
Louis Vuitton
brands.
Specifically, I've looked into, and they have 4 manufacturing locations. And I have products in the family that is from, I think, all but one.
Yeah, and the counter argument will be then, but even they're having suppliers of prefabricated things that they then produce in these manufacturing cities, right? And all of this stuff. So there's, this is like catching an eel. It's so slippery because these, and in brackets, conspiracy people who think like, no, everything is made in China. Don't just, I don't try to convince me it's not, because it is, because that must be true. Just because some random counterfeit fabrication manufacturing person told them on a video on TikTok that everything is made in China. And he shows his own factory where they make fakes, right?
Yeah, but the thing is, we have a lot of newspapers that are also taking this.
Yeah, nobody does research anymore. Nobody checks.
No, this is the funny thing. The 2 newspapers I put in are Louis Vuitton bags made in China.
Yeah.
In Google. 2 top things, Hindustan Times and the Times of India, have said made in China, labeled in Italy. Viral video alleges Gucci, blah, 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 are made in China. And they essentially just
So do they say yes or no?
They don't say anything of value.
Well, see, this is the thing where I think that as a publication, you have to do at least the basic standard of actually saying, okay, there's somebody claiming something. So what? Everybody can claim anything on the internet and does so every time. Just because it gets viral and it gets shared 50 million times doesn't mean it's true, right? I mean, this is where I think, see, are a lot of things made in China? Yes. Do we have? I mean, look, I am using probably a microphone made in China. I'm using a computer that is probably made in China or in Taiwan.
My microphone is made in Australia.
That is true. You're using a Rode, which is great. I'm using an SE Electronics, which is an American company, but they produce everything in China. But
you have everything in the world in China, right?
But you are using a Mac, right? So that is made in China.
No, it's not. Because my Mac is made in the U.S. in Austin,
because
Texas.
You have this big fat old thing.
I have the Mac Pro. Haha.
But okay.
Jacques.
My MacBook is made in China. Your iPhone is made in China. Yes. Now they're producing also in India. But see, the point is,
I knew that would come in handy once.
What?
That it was made in America. I always thought it was cool, but I forgot about it.
You can sell it to somebody in the U.S. without tariffs.
Nah, I don't think that's how it works.
Because it is made. It's where it's made.
It's made in the U.S., but it's already been exported, so
doesn't
it's
matter.
re-imported.
No, that doesn't matter. What matters is the country of origin of the product. Because if you want to have something made in China and you send it from the UAE, you still have the Chinese import tariffs because the product is made in China, and you have to declare this in your performer invoice. The origin of the product, not where you send it from.
Have these rules went into place yet? Have these rules gone into place, or is it still on hiatus?
No. It's on a 30% at the moment. Chinese.
So because I just not for China, because I just sold my Oris.
Switzerland,
right?
I think, is at the moment 10%.
Is it 10%? Because this is what, because
I
they,
think, because I think it's
shipped,
also paused, but I'm not 100% sure. I think it's
I
paused.
shipped to US via FedEx, and FedEx asked specifically country of origin of the goods, right?
Correct.
So I had to declare that it was from Switzerland.
Yo. But this is the problem when you say, for example, let's coming back to the products, when made in Italy, if made in Italy means in let's say it very carefully, so little has to actually been made there. You know, like Swiss made, there's a lot of things with Swiss made. It has to have a Swiss movement. So now, what is a Swiss movement is a different story. We have to discuss this as well. But it has to have a Swiss movement. If you watch a Swiss movement, and it has to have 60% of the value generation has to be done in Switzerland.
Now, how you address that value generation is already questionable, because I could have
100%. You can put a golden
the
rotor
Donald
on it.
Trump watches. You put it in a gold case that was made in Switzerland, and the case is going to be worth more than 99.9% of the value of the watch.
Or just the assembly is done in Switzerland, which adds so much of value because it's so expensive for the Swiss.
Especially if it's a super cheap watch, right? So if you have an absolute shitter, which is worth zero,
absolutely,
the hour that it took for some guy in Switzerland to put it together is going to be worth way more than the parts.
Or you put in a golden rotor that is quite expensive, right? Compared to whatever parts you used before. But on the other hand, the movement itself is also something Swiss made. So it has to be assembled in Switzerland, the movement itself. And of course, the significant part of the majority of parts have to be Swiss and something else. So there is a couple of little things that have to be made. So it is not entirely made in Switzerland. But my point is with Italy, for example, when it means so little of the value generation, of course there's room for interpretation, and a lot of people then say like, see, everything is made in China, but that's not true. And on the other hand, sometimes I just don't care where it's made if it's made to the standard I want.
I completely
Do I have
agree
a
with
problem
you.
that my iPhone is made in China? No, it's perfect. It's a wonderful quality product. I am happy, right?
And that gets me back to the point that everything can be made in China, because it's what you pay for is what you get. Yes, you will find artisans in China. Look at the jade, jewelry and things like this that are extremely expensive, right? Those are for instance, jade work is extremely difficult and they cost a lot of money. And even if you go to China, it's made in China, but they're not made by the same, sweatshop workers that are making my t-shirt. Right. So there is going to be a vast array of craftsmen versus laborers. And yes, Temu stuff is going to be coming from the laborers, but
See, this is the thing. I think that's also one of the things is even the construction of an iPhone needs a lot of skills, right? So these skills is not available in other countries anymore, because even if they wanted to, you cannot just move iPhone production somewhere else very easily, because skilled labor in that regard of manual putting these things together is
but by the way, remember,
easy.
Apple also has a manufacturing facility for iPhones in India.
They produce now, I think, up to 30% they can produce in India if they want to.
But it's for certain markets, right? So, for instance,
for now,
they said but now this is a perfect way for them to mitigate the Chinese issue.
But Trump already scolded Tim Cook, I think, last week, just pretty recently, to say that's not what I meant.
Yeah,
you should take it to US, not in India. But, So they have challenges there. But my point there is, you have certain craftsmanship that is very, very detailed. And now let's go to the bags, for example, the MS bags. There is a manufacturing, of course, in France where they make these very delicate and these Birkin bags and all of this stuff. The handle is something that takes about 8 to 10 hours to finish. A single person who makes these handles. I have seen, and this is after 3 years of training. I have seen artisans, and they have done that. They have toured the artisans in exhibitions around the world. And they have this, and in the Dubai Mall, they had these people who make the scarves, people who make the handbags, people who make watches, and they actually had them there to explain to just normal people like us who walk past and say like, explain to me how this works. And they would show you how they actually produce these things. And these are the real artisans sitting in France making these things. And the guy who made the handbag handles told me how long it takes to actually learn this craft because of not just the saddle stitching and all of the stuff where MS is just famous for. You can, of course, replicate that. And Chinese can replicate a lot of this because they have very skilled craftsmen from the copying part.
Yes.
And also not from not copying. I mean, there's a lot of craftsmen in China that are just fantastic with what they have and skill set. I'm not trying to downplay this, but in this case, this is a very, very long investment in their training and development of their craftsmen. And Hermes prides themselves of having them very long-term tenures in their company. They work there for decades. Because it's so hard to train, they're well paid, and they actually make very, very high quality things. And you don't ruin this outsourcing it to China and then saying, okay, and I'm still charging $30,000 for a handbag.
Yeah, a bag.
Because it just ruins the entirety of your heritage, of what you stand for.
Brand.
Yeah,
right?
Of your brand. It would be a disaster if they would do this. And they don't, because they are very clear about this. And also as a family-owned company, they can afford, for example, to not make profits for a year or two if they wanted to. I'm sure they make a lot of profit, but they could because they have no shareholders to report to, right?
But this is exactly what Louis Vuitton, this is exactly what Rolex is doing, right? So
yeah,
Rolex
exactly.
is playing a very, very long game, right?
Yeah,
they could have easily, when there was huge demands, ramped up production of Submariners and GMTs, closed everything else and said, screw the Datejusts, screw the, all the other stuff, and just produced entirely subs. And that could absolutely have happened. But in the future, what would have happened is all of a sudden you have a massive flood of subs from 2020. Mm-hmm. And everybody's like, well, why the hell is there no Datejusts, right? So they understand that, tastes change. Therefore, they have a percentage. This is what we want to do to maintain a fixed breakdown of all of our product ranges. And
100%,
exactly, because in 10 years' time, nobody's going to remember COVID, and nobody's going to remember that we had a huge surge of disposable income, and everybody wanted to buy a stainless steel Rolex, right?
See, this is the thing. I think they understand if we just flood the market, it will be a short-term gain. But that's it.
Yeah.
But when and you in the long term, continue this,
bad.
They're selling this bloody watch for 50, 60 years, 70 years.
75 years.
Yeah. So
70 something.
They want to continue doing this and having it still something to aspire to. But if you just have it available everywhere immediately, the only thing that prevents you from getting it is the price, right? So you still have to have a bit of exclusivity. So in order not to make it super expensive, you may need to have some other things that makes it hard or in demand or something that is cool. And that could be, for example, what they are doing now, the game you play that you can't just walk in and get one. Because it's not just the price; it's also just getting it. Same with MS, where the exclusivity is something that is not just the price, because that is relatively easy nowadays.
And
right?
I've told you what this is called before. This is what we call a Veblen good, right? A Veblen good is something that it's not the price that is keeping you from buying it. So when you get to these top 1%,
and Veblen goods have this specific. Feature basically that the more expensive they get, the higher the demand. Where usually it's the opposite.
It's the opposite.
The higher the price get, the lower will eventually the demand give.
Exactly.
But this is different. Yeah. And that's these so-called Veblen goods, from Mr. Veblen who figured that out. I want to say something special because I have a very, very, and this is world news. We've never heard this before anyway, but I have a theory. It's, of course, kind of a conspiracy theory, but I think I love 100% correct,
theories.
of course.
Okay.
And that is, in the new Land Dweller, we have a transparent case back. In the 1908, we have a transparent case back. Mm-hmm. In some select Daytonas, we have a transparent case back. Why is Rolex putting transparent case backs in their newer watch models? Now, my point is,
Can I guess before you say it?
Yes.
So I have two guesses.
Yeah.
One is they're reducing cost because generally in precious metal models, it would cost more to have a closed case back because, of course, it would be gold and not glass. Two, one of the ways to always tell a fake Rolex from a real Rolex was to look at the movement. But with a closed case back, you have to open the watch.
Correct.
And now they're trying to
and that
show
is exactly
my
point. I think this incredible amount of fakes that you cannot distinguish, even experts have trouble being 100% confident that something is a fake just from the outside, and they have to open the watch and look at the movement, because that is still the absolute telltale sign, because they have some stuff that watchmakers in China cannot replicate. For example, this whole
silicone hairsprings.
For example, a silicone hairspring, or this setting of the balance wheel, and all of the stuff that you do, that you don't have these pushers, right? These little pushers, and these Chinese fake movements try to hide them under the bridge and all of this stuff, but you still can see them when you open the movement, and certain finishing techniques that are still something, even though it's machine made and with Rolex, it's still something you can't do. Like the new movement from the Land Dweller, it's incredible technology that they have used with the double impulse thing. So you cannot do this in China. You don't have the parts to do that in China, and the technology to do this in China yet. So showing the movement makes it very easy with a transparent case back to immediately see, handling the watch, putting it in your hand, turning it around, and you can see, this is real and this is fake. And that's, I think, one thing that Rolex has not needed to do for the longest period of time, because they had such high tolerances and had such high material science in their pieces that they could identify a real one from a fake one from the outside.
Fairly
but now
easily.
You cannot. To a certain extent, the really super reps from the outside is so hard to still distinguish them.
Yes, but once again, just by unscrewing the screw down crown, you can 99% tell. So you have to get tactile with it.
Yes.
But looking at pictures, you cannot.
That is true. And you can sometimes feel just the thread of how you screw in the crown.
Yeah.
You feel what the quality is, the tolerances and all of this stuff. But then again, I'm talking about the super replicas, right? I mean, my most expensive replica that I had in my hands is about a $700-800 Daytona fake watch, and it was the one that I have in real, right? So I had it at home and I checked it. Since then I have given it away, so it's not anymore in my possession. But from the first look, impossible. From unscrewing the crown, yes, when you know how the real ones is,
exactly.
And it's also the pushers, but just visually and just holding it in your hand, I would say if you really have the original in your hand, you might feel something is not exactly the same, but you can't put your finger on. Once you take a loop, sometimes you see certain things, like on this tachymeter, there was a small difference in 1 or 2 numbers where you think, okay, this is where there is a small difference. But again, you need to have the original, right?
Yep.
In a one-to-one connection. Unscrewing the crown, as I said, yes, absolutely. And also the sound of the rotor, how you actually wind it and all of this stuff. You know, the click when you actually wind in the non-winding direction of the crown. This watch didn't have a click for whatever reason. It only wound in one direction. So it was weird. But it's
What do you mean it only wound in one direction? Oh.
Yeah. So when you
not the crown. The crown?
Yeah, the crown. So when you wind it in one direction, you feel that you wind the movement.
Yes.
But if you go into the other direction, you have this empty click, right, from the click wheel, and then when you wind a watch, it's very normal that you have in one direction you wind, and the other one it just have normal slight click. You will have the same in yours. So that wasn't existing there. And
let me try.
So sometimes it's these little things, but what I found incredible is that this movement.
Yeah, the click.
There's a click wheel that just prevents the watch, from unwinding or so. But my point is that this movement in itself, from a accuracy point, it was actually within superlative chronometer specs. The Chinese copy movement. For how long? Okay, that's a different story. I don't know. I mean, I didn't have it long enough to check that. But technically, it was surprising to me that this actually kept time so well, that it was a copy movement that was actually regulated so well. But that shows, for all intents and purposes, this is what the counterfeiters saying, like, you are silly if you buy the real one, because you can get an equally good one as a counterfeit for so much less. But then the problem is the counterfeit will not exist if the original doesn't exist, right? Because you would not buy this counterfeit if the original didn't exist. So the whole point of existence of a copy or fake is always that the other one is there with the reputation, with the heritage, with the demand, with the and this is what I think, like, don't you get it? It's still a fake. It doesn't matter how good it is. Even if it's an absolutely exact same thing, it's still a fake. It's not the original. So
it is. And that's the thing is, once again, homages, all of these fakes don't exist. The other thing, by the way,
if you say it like this, technically, every copy of a book that you get digitally is not the original to a certain extent, right? But the original author gets the money, and that's why he writes these nice
stories. Which then gives him money to make more.
Exactly. But if you copy and you rip off that person and you just copy the book, you have the same book, you have the same words, you have the same story, and you read it. But the author doesn't get anything from it. So it means in the long run, this author will not write books anymore because he will not get paid. So it just doesn't, counterfeiting is bad. You are actually really just stealing.
It is, of course. And now we've gotten to the point where China has started infringing on their own stuff, right? Because once again, as we said, we have everything in China, and Chinese craftsmen have started making things. So we have many Chinese watch companies now, right? So we have Seagull, we have what's the other one with the globe, whose name I have forgotten.
I don't know.
Sega Designs.
Also Sega Design, yes. There's a lot of them also from Hong Kong, right? There's Atelier Ven and some other really good ones. And
if we want to go into the China-Hong Kong question, but you know what I mean? Let's try to stick to China itself. Then in China now, what's happening is companies are knocking off other Chinese companies. And this is leading to big debates not just basically in intellectual property protection, because China, as we know, does not believe in intellectual property rights.
There's two things to it. I think this is one of the things. There's a reason why this happens now, and why the market is flooded with all of this disinformation and this stuff with all of these people coming out publicly showing their counterfeit factories. Because China has, for the tariff wars, for the trade wars, they have said, we will temporarily suspend our copyright infringement crackdown, because they had a because of the World Trade Organization and others, and of course the deals that you have with other countries. They have all demanded, you need to do something about our copyright protection. Otherwise, we will not sell into your market, and you cannot sell into our market. So you have to do something about the copyright infringements in your country. And China did. They did a lot of crackdown on these things.
We can debate that.
Yeah, well, okay. At least publicly, they have cracked down.
Yeah, publicly,
and
as an image.
Trade war, when it started, they said one of the things we will do, except not just counter tariffs, but also we will just completely temporarily allow the counterfeiters to run rampant. Because then look, US and the West, what will happen? Because we will copy everything and we will flood the markets everywhere and we'll let them export everywhere. We'll not control anything anymore. We'll just let them run. And then you see what you get. And that is, and one of the tastes we got from this was from all of these videos coming from China, and they're not coming just like that from China, right? They're coming on TikTok, on a Chinese platform, and boof, flooded the entirety of the internet and became viral. Who controls the algorithms there as well, right? So it's, it just became viral by design.
Yeah.
And for a reason, to just show this is what's going to happen. We will hurt these companies. And Hermes and Chanel and others have already sued them, right? They have already filed lawsuits against this, saying like, you cannot claim these things because it's not true, right? So the point is, but it's so hard to get to the people.
Any legal traction. But now, once again, that we have Chinese companies suing other Chinese companies.
Yes, because
this has become
because once you have your own original design and you become successful, and you see somebody else ripping you off in your own country, you think like, wait a second.
Up until now, China had nothing to protect, right?
Yeah.
So it was it was a entire thing based of copying other people. So now that they're creating, they will very, very quickly realize that they cannot keep creating if everyone's copying them, right?
Yes.
And who's copying them is their own people. So this is going to become a very big hotbed of messes.
There's always this Asian mentality, and I don't mean this in a very bad way, in a very positive way, that copying your master is something to aspire to, because you are showing the respect to the master.
It's not just that. It's fundamentally in this idea of collectivism, right?
Yeah, but what
collectivism
I'm saying is,
instills sharing, and sharing means nobody owns anything, and that means nobody owns the rights to anything. Yeah. And therefore, I can make whatever you make out of a sign of respect, or out of simply the fact that we're sharing everything.
Yeah.
So that also becomes a big factor in this.
Yeah. The thing is with the apprentice and the master is always that the apprentice copying the master makes sense because you learn the master's craft, obviously. But you work for the same master, right? I mean, in the end, it's if you're a different company and you're just copying somebody else's master, it's a bit. But anyhow, you're right. There's also this kind of from the old communist part that you're saying like, okay, it's all shared, nobody owns anything, and it's all the society that owns it. But China is very capitalist at the moment, so it's. But my point is there. When you have this, you look at what happens to the camera business, and you know this. There was European camera manufacturers, a lot of Germans. Right? German camera manufacturers. And then the first Canon and Nikons and all of these came out 100 years ago, right? The first cameras from Japan. And they were blatant copies, right? And they were shoddy quality at the time. They were really, really bad quality. Like the first Japanese cars back in the days, they were not on the same quality level. So what did the manufacturers do? They laughed it off, right? They said, yeah. So they became better. With every iteration, they became better. And eventually they were equal. And then they surpassed them. So in the beginning,
and
it
this
was
is what's
really
happening in China right
copies.
now.
And then they innovated on these things and became better. And that happens in China as well. Eventually.
But now listen. If we're talking cars, the Japanese did this in the 80s.
Correct.
The cameras, of course, for cars alone, this was in the 80s. The Japanese, everyone laughed it off.
Yes.
Then they got better.
The first Japanese cars in Germany, people were saying, who would buy this
who cares?
Right? Yeah.
Then we did the same thing in 2000 with the Korean cars.
Yes.
And now we're looking at Genesis as a viable alternative to a Lexus
company. Yes.
Yeah. And now the Chinese are doing this.
Yeah.
And still we're at this crossroads. We've almost stopped laughing at them. We're still a little bit laughing at them.
Yeah.
With their Ling Long tires. But at the end of the day, we know for a fact, we've seen this happen twice already. And it will get to the point where everyone says, oh, there's just another car company, right? Mm-hmm. But in order for this to happen, they need to start making original designs. And as of now, look at Jet Tour, look at this Rocks, look at all of these things. All they are basic Defender copies. Mm-hmm. And you're saying that the Chinese government is doing something about this, but no, they're not. They're allowing all of these companies to copy designs.
Yes, to a certain extent, they copy designs, but not as close that it gets them into trouble. Before, and this is the thing,
it was a one-to-one replica.
It was literally a one-to-one copy.
Do you remember the Land Rover,
the BMW X5, and the back of the Mercedes, whatever?
Yeah, no, they had a one-to-one copy of a Land Rover, and it was called the Land Wind.
Yeah, and Land Wind was one of these cars that came to, let's say, to European markets as well in the beginning, and they had big crash test problems, right? They were so bad because the steel was so soft that they would just fold itself together, and then you would die in a 50-kilometer crash, right? Because it was so bad. But now Chinese cars even get five-star crash test ratings. So this is all they have it developed so much faster than other companies to get on the same level playing field at certain.
It is very quick.
But what I'm saying with that is, can they produce a lot of things? Yes. But are these videos of these Hermes handbags and Chanel and Louis Vuitton and watches now as well, where they're saying all the Swiss watches are made in China? So do watch bracelets. You know, when we talked about this company Dexel, where I said they make these ceramic bracelets, right? For so many companies.
Yeah.
This company in Switzerland has 3 manufacturing sites. The one in Switzerland for the high-end brands, one in Thailand and I think, and one in Malaysia. So that shows you something, right? They are saying depending on what quality you want and what heritage your brand is and what's your selling price, we can produce in 3 different manufacturing sites. The most detailed one you get in Switzerland, but you can get them also produced in different locations. And I don't nail me on Thailand and Malaysia. I think that's what it was, but I can't remember for sure. And they publicly say that on their website. The same happens for bracelet makers, other bracelet makers, not just the ceramic bracelets and stuff, and clasp makers like these. They can produce them probably in China as well. And we had this one thing that bracelets from certain companies like the Swatch Group and Omega and all of this stuff are made in China, and they probably might be. Right, but the problem is, since they're machine made, if the machine is in China or in Switzerland or in Burkina Faso, it doesn't matter really where the machine produces these things.
I'm going to go into a little bit. It does matter, because look at what the Japanese did with Grand Seiko and the Zalats machine. The Germans made the Zalats machine, right?
Yeah, but the Zalats machine is a spinning tin plate. Nobody is as insane to actually try to do this by hand.
But that's what I'm saying. But these
but
guys...
this is craftsmanship.
Exactly.
This is not machine made.
They took something, but you're saying that... No, because it was the insanity behind polishing an entire watch and every single thing. The Germans said, no, not possible. And the Japanese said, yeah, we can do it.
But this is because you have to train this again. Your artisan who actually does the Zaratsu polishing on this machine has to be trained for years in order to be.
Very many years, right? They said.
And the point is, this is not machine made. This is a machine they use, but it's still a skill. It's still a craftsman. It's a handmade thing.
Yeah, but you just said it doesn't matter what machine it is.
In fully machine made stuff, if it's a CAD/CAM machine that actually just carves out, a bracelet parts. If it's fully machine made, there's no person spinning, polishing anything by hand. Then where this machine actually spits out these parts doesn't matter. But if there's a person utilizing this machine who needs 5 years of training, that's a different story. Of course, that's that's skill and that's craftsmanship, because they use just the machine as a tool, like a hammer. So this is not, you know what I mean? My point is mass production in a machine. And if the same machine can be bought and put into a Chinese factory floor or Swiss factory floor, then it doesn't really matter where it spits out these parts.
Yes.
But, and this is for these mass machine-made stuff. But on the other hand, Swatch watches are 100% Swiss-made. They make all of this stuff in their completely robotized factories. And you can visit them.
And you're buying them for like 200 dirhams. You can buy, actually even less, right? The flick flacks, 100 dirhams you can buy.
And they are made in Switzerland because they are so highly automated that they're, that like the System 58 is a mechanical movement that needs one screw and is entirely made by robots. So there is not, and they pride themselves with that, funny enough, in Swatch Group, saying like this mechanical movement is never touched by a human hand.
I just Googled something as well. Let's pause.
It's like the opposite of what we aspire to as watch nerds.
Yes, but if we're talking about Swiss made, there is mass manufacturing going on in Switzerland as well.
Yeah, of course.
Not in the watch world. So for instance, I just Googled because I had a sneaky suspicion and I was right. Every single Nespresso pod sold in the world is manufactured in Switzerland.
Yeah.
Which is nuts to think about how many of those. You go into any grocery store, they're sitting there on the shelf in hundreds, thousands of them, right?
Mhm.
Every single one of these was made in Switzerland. So Swiss manufacturing is not the end all be all of, price, for instance, right?
Sometimes you are also surprised of how much actually you can, how I am surprised sometimes. Haribo?
Yes.
Yeah. Haribo is
Gummy
a
bears.
company that is a family-owned company. They make about, I think, $600 million euros or something revenue in a year. It's not even $1 billion revenue company. And they produce in, I think, 2 locations in Bonn, in Germany, and in Turkey, I think, for the non-gelatin version, but not, the halal versions of stuff. So basically, that's it. And they have 2. I mean, if you look at the factories, you think like, whoa, that's it. That's where they produce for the entire world, all of this stuff.
And this is, I told you, I when I went to drove past the Barilla factory, that was my exact same thought. I'm like,
how is this possible?
This little place
Yes.
in the middle of nowhere on a highway is pumping out all these blue box pastas
and that's
all over the world. It's nuts.
It is. On also these smaller medium and smaller medium sized companies that are world renowned, like Stihl, STIHL, these super
The drills,
chainsaws and stuff, right?
Yeah.
They are just, I think they have 200 employees. That's it.
It's crazy when you
and
think
they're
of it.
world known for doing the best chainsaws in the world, right? But this is it. I mean, they're not even 200 probably. They probably have less now because of efficiencies and stuff and automation. But this is where you sometimes really wonder of how much you can produce if you just produce efficiently, right?
If you know what you're doing, right? But this once again will take knowledge and creativity to get there.
And the other thing is, I want to bring up 2 things, right? About when people complain about it's not really Swiss made, because, certain things are not actually produced there, or you don't have your own leather manufacturing for your straps. That's why you don't, it's not fully made. Yeah. Where do you end? With the cows, the grass? I mean, Swiss chocolate, Belgian chocolate is world renowned. Do they have any cocoa plants in Belgium or in Switzerland?
or in Switzerland? No, they don't.
See, where are all the cocoa plants for Swiss chocolate? It's not really Swiss.
Yeah, exactly. So this happens with everything, right?
Yeah.
So
Swiss coffee, Italian coffee, they don't grow coffee beans.
Yeah, let's talk about okay. The same thing goes into car manufacturing, right? Okay, two things. Now I'm going to go off on a tangent here. Volvo is being made in China, right? A large number of Volvos are now being manufactured in China. They're owned by a Chinese company now, and they're owned by Geely. But you heard about the big drama in Volvo right now?
No.
Cars coming out of the Chinese plant have been found to have, for the expensive option of the speakers, the Bowers and Wilkins, they have been installing fake Bowers and Wilkins. So someone somewhere has been saving some money by buying off-brand fake ones. And they noticed this. The W was actually 2 Vs.
Oh, no.
Yes. And
Such
this
a
was
silly thing then.
Now they have a recall, because imagine if you were some guy who opted the multi-$1,000 sound system in your car, and
that's,
you got some.
See, and this is what they say sometimes. What happens with in countries that have this hierarchy thinking, that there's somebody who just cuts corners, and cutting corners is something that is more applauded than rather than vilified, because it should be vilified. In this case, it's like, look, I just saved the company so much money.
So this was confirmed
and
in I don't know,
the money, right? Who knows?
So 350 cases have been found with these fake Bowers and Wilkins.
Wow.
So and it went to, this was in the U.S. specifically, and it went to the point where a Volvo dealership ordered replacement parts. And in the replacement parts, got the fake parts as well. Ooh. So it wasn't just installed; it was also shipped out to them.
Yeah. So this is ridiculous. And when you have heard about this with planes as well, right? Airbus and Boeing planes, when they get their spare parts, and the spare parts can be fake.
Yeah,
And you
everything.
think, how on earth? I mean, look, this is such a. I mean, nowadays it's obviously also such a big business. But you thought this is so niche. How would a company decide? You know what?
I'm gonna
let's make a
fake
fake
Boeing
Boeing
parts.
part.
It's
insane.
crazy to think about, but yeah, this is exactly what's happening.
This is the argument a lot of people are saying. Like, it's produced in these Chinese factories anyways, and I just let the machines run a bit longer and just produce the same quality parts and then sell them through the back door
To someone
but
else.
that's
Exactly.
not the thing, because otherwise
It
these
does
fake things
happen.
would have had the same quality, but they don't. And this is
Yeah, they don't, but this does happen at some point with a lot of parts where you do exactly this. But in these cases,
it's a very it might happen rarely, but it's a
no, this is more common than you think.
this
but
whole
it's
fell
not
from
the
the
it's not this
truck thing.
it's not this backdoor thing. It's the fact is a company will go and buy a manufacturer or hire a manufacturer to make a part for them. Right? So they'll say, you make a good, I don't know, turbocharger. We want you to put our badge on the turbocharger.
Yep.
So they will stamp Mercedes. Well, guess what? You ordered 500. I'm still making those turbochargers, but I'm not going to put Mercedes on it.
Yeah.
And through this, this has been around for ages, right? There's a number of websites where you can go on and you find the OE manufacturer for a specific part.
Yeah.
And then you could buy the generic branded
sure.
version of that part as well.
Yeah, I'm not disputing
But I
that
think the
does
companies
exist,
know this.
but it's
The
like
companies know about this.
yeah. But this is for a certain part when you can get the original part, and to a certain extent when the copyright or whatever the agreements run out, you as
Exactly.
the OEM, original equipment manufacturer, it's not means that you are the manufacturer of it, but the OEM that produced the original equipment, you can then also sell directly.
Correct. Exactly. And this is totally legitimate, and we see this a lot.
But my point is that a lot of these fakers are saying, it comes from the same factory. But most likely, if you look at the quality, there's no way it comes from the same factory, right? It's just very often it's just used as this because, sometimes it happens, but the majority of the fakes do not come from these factories. They come from actually counterfeiters, right? And so that's why I think it's one of these very nice arguments that people try to use to say, well, it's in any case coming all from the same factory, while it does not. And this is especially with watches and stuff. It is not. You can see, and that's why, for example, you can always tell a Rolex, fake Rolex from the movement, because there is still things you cannot copy. And if you can copy everything, and it would be so expensive to do, that it wouldn't make any sense. It wouldn't make any sense, I think, for that. Because then you end up selling it for the same price. And we see this already with the super replicas. They're thousands of dollars,
which is nuts. Who's spending thousands of dollars? You could buy a Doug.
Yeah, exactly. But this was always my point for all of these people saying, like, I want a Submariner, but I'm not paying the price. I'm buying a super fake. It's equally good. Yes, for you, it's fine. It works. But the problem is, why don't you just spend this money in an originally made watch that is from Longines or from Tudor instead? If you spend that amount of money, buy something original.
Point.
Don't buy a fake of something that you are not, because then you're also, it's just,
Once again, any price point can get you a watch, right? So there is no need for you to buy a fake watch, ever. As Ralph chugs from a carton of milk, by the way. It's one of those little school kids' cups.
Laban.
Laban.
Yes.
That's funny. But anyway, so this is the point.
See what it says.
It's the original.
Labanap, the original. I have not, I don't drink the
copies. No copies for you. So, end of day, we end up with all these issues, all these problems when it comes to faking. And of course, it doesn't give any confidence into the original manufacturers of parts, of watches, of whatever, to continue doing what they're doing, because everything is now just kind of like a fake.
But what we can,
and my wife has said this, by the way, and she knows nothing about these things. She says, why would anyone buy a Land Rover Defender anymore when about 1/3 of all cars that look like Land Rovers, maybe even 1/4, is an actual one, and 3 out of 4 are copies. Because every time you say, "Oh, look, a Defender," and then you're like, "Oh, wait, never mind, it's a Chinese copy."
Yeah.
It's and every single time there's like 5 different versions. And I go through this, and I'm just, now I see a Defender, and I'm like, it's a Chinese one. And I'm like, oh, no, wait, it's actually a real one.
Yeah.
But the guy who's driving it paid a bunch of money for this. And by the way, the price difference is not that much, right?
What?
We're talking
The Defender is very expensive. Yeah.
350K for a Defender, or 250K for a copy. So you're paying 2/3 of the price for the copy. Once again, I looked up the Jitor, was about 250K.
Really? That's terribly expensive for
it is. And the Rox T1 is even more.
Yeah, but if you're looking at let me see, a Land Rover here, for example, they are quite expensive. I mean, I just recently looked at the Range Rovers, and I thought, like, bloody hell. So
yeah, the Range Rover is nuts. But if you just want a Land Rover in UAE, we're looking at,
I think you're looking at 500,000. No.
No. Defender is 350.
The Defender 110 P300.
288, you can buy one.
Yeah.
On Land Rover UAE, 288 buys you a Defender. Obviously, it's going to be base specs, right?
Mm.
So 288 and up. Okay. So let's look up the Jitor. Also, by the way, all of these Chinese cars, if you've noticed, have a 1 in their thing. Apparently, they want to show that they are the best. So there's, I think it's called the T1. And then we have the Rox R1. So
is the T1 better than the T2?
I don't know. That's the question. Let me look up the T2.
Or more expensive? I don't know.
So once again, 288. This one's the T2 is 150 base model.
Okay.
Which once again, that's a little cheaper than that. But check out the Rox R. I think it's the Rox 1. And that is 220 starting price. 265 if you get the certain 265 starting price. Sorry. 265. So essentially the 220 was used. 265. Almost the same price.
But this is the
Range
Defender
it's copying.
Like not the Defender. It's a bit of a mix.
No. It's a mix. It's a half and half. It has those boxes that you put with the rear wheel on the back. I think it's more of a copy of the Defender than anything, because it has a spare wheel and those storage boxes.
Yeah. See what I don't understand with this car is that you have this. It's a hybrid, right?
The Rox.
Yeah. The Rox is
a hybrid. Yeah,
is a sort of a hybrid. It has a 1.5 liter turbocharged engine and electric, so it has about 470 horsepower. 740 nanometers of torque, which is a lot.
Nanometers.
Yeah. Newton meters, not
nanometers.
Nanometers. It is a nanometer of torque. That's very little.
That's very little.
Newton meters, yes, of course. So I'm always surprised if you have a car like this of this size and you have a 1.5 liter turbocharged engine in it. It sounds to me, it's so
like nothing. Yeah.
I mean, okay, Formula One has 1.7 liters V6s, but it's still, I don't know. It feels weird.
Because we're from the olden days.
Yeah,
that's why.
Yeah.
That's why it seems like a little, but
the 5.7 liter V8.
Yeah, that's what you
small
mean.
Small block.
No, a big block. Why would you go for a small block? I always wondered that, right? If you have a small block and a big block, why wouldn't you go for the big block?
Well, the small block was 5.7 and the big block was 6.4
it's like 6
or 7 liters.
Yeah, it's huge. But remember, the big blocks, if I'm not mistaken, went all the way up to 8.2.
Yeah, sure.
There's 8.2 liter V8s in the Ford F series pickup trucks.
I'm sure not anymore. It has to be something.
No, these were in the 90s.
Yeah, 90s.
They had huge 8.2 liter V8s. I think in the 90s, and it made a whopping 190 horsepower.
Yeah, back in the days, they were just not the most efficient. And then there was when I grew up as a kid, I always had this thing that the American cars had a lot of horsepower, but the size of the engine was, I mean, just absolutely insane. You had these big Bukes and whatever, these huge cars. It was like long as a sailing ship, like 6 meters, 5 meter long cars. They had these massive engines. They weighed a ton. They were wallowing. They were, they were not sporty at all. And then they had 200 horsepower, and they would consume like 20, 25 liters per 100 kilometer. And you think, what's going on there, right?
And I just saw an ad from the 80s, by the way, just yesterday. And it was, somebody shared it with me. And it was an ad for a Cadillac. And it was a guy, and he was driving a Lincoln Town car. And they're waiting at the valet stand in front of a restaurant, and he said, "Can you bring around my Lincoln Town car?" And the guy's like, "And bring around my Cadillac." And the guy replies like, "It's a shame Cadillac doesn't make bigger cars. All their cars are so small." And he brings around this Cadillac, and it was like half a meter longer than the Lincoln. And they're like, "Introducing the new Cadillac Brougham, now 4 feet longer than the blah, blah, blah." And they were simply just going for how long the car was. Nobody cared about any other metric. And then it said the Cadillac Brougham is the longest production vehicle in the world. And I'm just like, why? That is not something that I care about.
It doesn't matter if it has interior space or boot space.
Nothing.
No,
it
it's
was
just
all
longer.
Engine and boot space, and that was it. And the middle part stayed the same. Just add half a meter onto each side. Call it a day.
Yeah, it's like the opposite. Like in watchmaking, when they make these the slimmest watch, right? The thinnest watch in the world. So there's a everybody tries to make the thinnest watch in the world. Nobody is trying to make the longest, the biggest, or the heaviest.
No, I think Invicta did that already.
Yes.
So it's hard to beat.
56 millimeters diameter.
Tall, yeah. Not just that, just tall as well.
Yeah.
But so it just shows you the craziness that people had, and I don't know how we got to this point, but we got to this point.
Exactly.
I think we're off enough on tangents, but it just shows you that where you make things often does not really matter, right?
No, but the thing is
how you make it does.
Yeah, but if it's fake, it's fake. And in this case, these kind of brands.
And don't fall for these stupid things about, it's straight from the factory.
And the Western products have no advantage.
Yeah.
Yes.
We all know the guy that believes this, right? Like there's always a guy. And I had a friend of mine in the bicycle community who keeps saying that, he had a bunch of these like Chinese unbranded bike frames. And he's like, it's the same as the Specialized, except, I got it for a good deal because it, came direct from the manufacturer. I'm like, okay. And he believed it. He actually believes it to this day. And he says the same thing about the tires on the cars and things like this. And he believed honestly that these carbon frames were being manufactured in China for these companies. So I did some digging. Turns out there's 2 carbon manufacturing companies that basically make all the bikes in the world. One is in Spain. It's owned by Orbea. The other one is in Taiwan, and it's owned by Giant. And they are the ones making 99% of the bikes for the world. And do you think that these guys are going to be selling to someone else, under a no-name brand frame and risk losing these licenses that they have, these massive contracts? No way. They would never do that. Let's say you might have a person who is an evildoer, a wrongdoer, and he's going to go try and do this. And he says, "I'm going to sell things out the back door." You don't think somebody would notice?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. The security, you've seen this, the leaked videos in the Apple factories, right? The amount of surveillance and security that is in these plants is insane.
Yeah, because they're producing sometimes like in secret, you don't want to have any leaks and all of this stuff. And you just don't want to have counterfeit stuff going around rampant and stuff. So, I mean, like there's always these stories that, it is the same, but even if it comes from the same factory, maybe these are the quality check rejects that you don't want because they are dangerous, because they are not meant for sale, because these are these are also things that are legitimate, right? And I always feel like if it's something that you wear, that you touch, that your bare skin touches, and sometimes for 20 hours a day or 18 hours a day, like your watch, I don't want it to be whatever, radioactive or some weird shit steel that nobody really knows what happened, because there's no control, there's no regulation, because it's a counterfeit, right? The counterfeits have no rules they apply to. They claim it's 904L steel, but is it? We wouldn't know, right? They just can claim anything because they lied in the first place about the brand. So
exactly. How are you going to trust? And this is what my friend who keeps saying this, and I'm like, you believe everything this Chinese seller is telling you, who's selling you a fake bike frame,
exactly.
right? I'm just thinking to myself, and then you know, we have in Elaine, we have Jebel Hafit, which is one of the biggest mountains, so we climb it a lot. And we're coming down, and you know, coming down, I've hit over, I think the top I've hit is 98 kilometers an hour coming down. You have to trust in your equipment. If you fall at that speed, you're dead. It's that simple. And he ended up breaking one of his Chinese carbon rims exploded. And he said, no, it's my fault because I used it too much. Stop making excuses. And it's not like he was getting a ridiculous deal at all.
Yeah.
He was paying like 2/3 of the price, just like with these Rox T1s and whatever. They're paying 2/3 of the price. Like at that point, just find something else. Like there's always going to be a legitimate bicycle brand or a legitimate car or a legitimate watch that you can buy instead of getting the fake. You're never going to win anything.
And wear
either
that
a beauty
one
contest
with pride.
or...
And it is no shame when people think like, I want to be part of the group without actually being part of the group.
Yes.
So you're buying a fake to be part of a group.
No, you're
you're lying to yourself, right? I mean, just like don't do that.
Ralph, let's say this.
Be proud of yourself and proud with what you wear.
Let's say you're in this predicament. You have zero money. You're just an absolute, you have no income. You can't afford to buy a watch, but you love the hobby, right?
Yeah.
You're an absolute watch fan. What do you wear? What do you buy?
Look, it is very simple. I'm just wearing it. These kind of watches you can buy, not, I mean, this is actually an homage, which is already borderline. But this is an homage of a watch that has not been made for 25 years or 30 years. So you can probably say, okay, that's fine to copy a design that is defunct, right? Yeah. Even though this is already borderline, right? But my point is, there's Casios for $20. There's Citizens. There's less than $20.
For $11, you can buy an F91W.
You can buy mechanical Citizens that are excellent, that are great. You can go to a flea market and buy used vintage mechanical watches for
nothing.
For literally nothing.
I was surprised by this, by the way. I was in one of these
doesn't need
watch
to be
shops.
Expensive. Watch hobby doesn't need to be expensive.
Exactly. And I was in this watch shop in Cyprus. And once again, what did I see? Orises for 40 euros.
Yes. The old ones. 17.
Absolutely. 1970s Orises. 40 euros. Go buy one. Who cares?
Swiss made watch. 100%
Swiss made. Exactly. And not a fake of anything, right?
Yeah.
So there's always an option. And you will never win anything.
And you get way more respect than with a vintage Oris than you get with the fake Submariner.
And if I saw somebody coming up to me with a fake anything, I would discredit that person in every aspect of his life.
Exactly. Because what else is not real in this person?
Exactly. What else is he lying about?
Yeah.
Because once again, you're not buying a fake watch. By wearing a fake watch, you're lying to yourself and to others, openly saying that, even if you don't say it, right? Somebody sees you and thinks, oh, he has a Rolex. That's a lie. Right? So it's immediately lying.
Yep.
So don't be that guy.
Don't be that guy. If you want to, then buy a Steinhardt or whatever, an Invicta, homage brands that look the same, they feel the same, they wear the same. If you want to tell yourself that, it's all fine. They are not bad watches. They are good watches. You can buy them. You can wear them. Be happy. Just don't buy a fake.
Exactly. And don't fall for the traps, the tourist traps.
Exactly. And on this, don't buy watches on the beach. from a person in a trench coat.
And I love the fact that they will even put, I remember I was in a beach and the guy comes to me and says, would you like to buy some sunglasses? And of course they were Oakley's at the time. I was young, and Oakley was a cool thing. And they even faked the made in USA on there.
Of course.
For $5.
Yeah. It's absolutely real.
And he would tell you they were real. He would honestly be like, yeah, they're all legit, of course.
They fell from a truck.
There you have it. Exactly.
On
that bombshell.
Exactly. Bye-bye. Speak to you next week.
See you next time.
Bye.